by hook theory. If you're not familiar with the iceberg meme, it's basically just a fun way to categorize a topic starting from the well-known and mainstream ideas at the top and then going progressively deeper into unusual and obscure ideas. And the great fun of these iceberg memes is seeing how weird it gets as you go down. So I thought I would create a music theory iceberg, and today we're going to start above ground at the tip of the iceberg and work our way down into the murky weirdness below. So starting at the very top, we've got A equals 440 Hz. This is what's called concert pitch, a standard universalized pitch that we tune A above middle C to allow all instruments to be in tune with each other without having to coordinate which note to tune to. Pretty much every piece of music you've ever listened to, particularly popular music, will be tuned to 440 Hz. We've also got some time signatures here, most prominently 4/4. As I'm sure you're aware, the vast majority of popular music is in the time signature of 4/4. But we do get some other time signatures sometimes, and the two most common ones beyond 4/4 would be 3/4 and 6/8. Over here, we've got 12-tone equal temperament. Pretty much every piece of music you've ever listened to will be in 12-tone equal temperament. Without going into too much depth, it's the way that we define how each note should be in tune with each other. All we have to do to tune something in 12-tone equal temperament is to tune all of the octaves first, and then divide those octaves into 12 equally spaced pitches. Over here, we've got our three standard accidentals, natural, sharp, and flat. We've got the pentatonic scale, perhaps the most fundamental and straightforward scale in all of music. We've got our two most common clefs, the treble clef and the bass clef, major and minor, which of course are the two overarching types of tonality in Western music. And I've also snuck in power chords here, which are chords that don't have a major or minor because they don't have a third. They're just a root and a fifth. Right, level 2. So we still haven't gone below the surface yet, but this is the tip of the iceberg with music theory. At the top here, we've got harmonic minor. So harmonic minor is a variation on the typical minor scale, on the natural minor scale, where we make one modification, we raise the 7th note. And this makes the scale more appropriate for writing harmony in the minor key. We've got a few more chord types here, chord types beyond major and minor. We've got diminished, augmented, 7th chords, inversions, and suspended chords. And although these chord types are certainly less common than major and minor, these will still turn up in a wide breadth of music in all styles. Over here, we've got the blues scale, which is exactly the same as the minor pentatonic scale, but with one additional note that we could call the blue note the flat fifth. Now, quite an important concept in this here is circle of fifths. The circle of fifths is sort of a universal tool that ties together various concepts in Western music. On the most basic level, it's a way of working out which sharps and flats are in each key, or in a more advanced usage, you could use the circle of fifths to conceptualize how different key changes might feel brighter or darker. Sequence is a very fundamental element of melody writing. It's basically when you take a phrase,
lights go out and I can be seen,
and then you immediately repeat that phrase, but now at a either higher or lower pitch.
tides that I tried to swim against.
And the last thing we've got on this tier is cadences. A cadence is basically just a short chord progression, a short chord movement that resolves a passage. The two main types of cadence that you'll hear used time and time again are the perfect cadence, also known as the authentic cadence, which is 5/1, or the plagal cadence, sometimes referred to as the amen cadence, that resolves from 4/1. And now we enter the water. And starting us off, we've got this selection of odd time signatures. As the name would suggest, these time signatures are odd, they're unusual. But because of that, they have a really intriguing quality, a really unusual sound to the Western listener. Diatonic modes is what you'll think of as just modes. Mixed Lydian, Dorian, Lydian, all of those common modes you hear about. A mode is when you take the notes of a scale, but then you treat a different note as the root point, as the starting point. So for example, G mixed Lydian is C major, but treating G as the root note. They're called diatonic modes here because they're referring to the modes of the major scale. Modal interchange is obviously related to modes. It's when in a piece of music you might switch between using different parallel modes. So one part of the music might be in E mixed Lydian, and another might be in E Dorian. Here we've got some different accidental marks. We've got double accidentals. This is a double flat, and this is a double sharp. For example, A double flat would be the note G natural, because we've flattened A twice. And the note A double sharp would be the note B, because we've sharpened A twice. There's various instances where you might need to use a double sharp or double flat when writing something down on sheet music. Down here we have the whole tone scale. This is a very easy scale to remember because it's literally just whole tones, tones going up. Now we mentioned these odd time signatures, or what we might call odd meters, but here we have mixed meter. Mixed meter is when a piece of music switches between different time signatures regularly, mixing different meters together. For example, Good Morning by the Beatles keeps switching time signatures, resulting in what you would call a mixed meter.
Nothing to do to save his life, call his wife in.
Now earlier we had the harmonic minor, here we've got the melodic minor. The melodic minor is another variation on the minor scale. This is the natural minor scale. The harmonic minor scale raises the 7th degree, and the melodic minor then raises the 6th degree as well, effectively to bridge the gap that was created when we raised the 7th degree. Upper chord extensions is basically any time you have a 9th, 11th, or 13th in a chord, and it could be a flat 9 or a sharp 9, or it could even be an add 9 or an add 11, that sort of thing. Anytime you have a chord like that, it's referred to as a upper chord extension. And this way symbol here is another type of clef. We already had the treble clef and the bass clef. This is what would usually be called the alto clef, and is nowadays only really used for the viola. Now, although normally when you see this symbol, it will be an alto clef, this symbol in its most basic form is what we actually call a C clef. The symbol is a stylized C, and it works out whatever line you put the C on is the C line. So in a standard alto clef, we put it so the middle line is passing through the middle of the C, so the middle line is C. This is actually the case with all clefs. A treble clef is what's called a G clef. So although we almost always place it on the second line up like this, making this line the G line, we could place it on a different line, changing where the note G is. And same for the bass clef. This is the F clef. The idea is whatever line passes through these two dots is F. In basic terms, a Neapolitan chord is a major chord built on the flat 2nd degree of the scale. However, it comes with some context as well. A true Neapolitan chord will be voiced like this in the first inversion, and will resolve onto the 5th chord of the key. And in Roman numeral analysis, we can even label the Neapolitan chord with its own unique symbol, a capital N. The augmented 6th is a similar type of chord, where you have to use it in a particular context. In basic terms, it's a dominant 7th chord built on the 6th degree of the minor scale. So for example, in the key of A minor, it would be an F7 chord. But the way we use an augmented 6th chord is our F7 here needs to now move to the 5th chord of the key, in this instance E major. And the voice leading has to be done in a particular way. The F at the bottom of the chord needs to resolve down onto E, and the E flat at the top of the F7 chord needs to resolve up onto E. And this is why it's called an augmented 6th chord. Because here we've got E flat resolving onto E, we actually instead label this as a D sharp, because this not only shows the player that this note is a leading note resolving up onto the E, but it also avoids a bit of an awkward accidental. And because we've labelled this E flat note as a D sharp, it's changed the interval of the chord from a dominant 7th, a minor 7th, into an augmented 6th, F to D sharp. And the last thing to remember with augmented 6th chords is there's actually 3 different types of voicing for them, each named after a different nationality. Another type of chord, this time from rock music rather than classical music, is the Hendrix chord. The Hendrix chord is just another name for a sharp 9 chord, a 7 chord with a sharp 9 added on top. So for example, we could have E7 sharp 9. This is our Hendrix chord. As the name suggests, Hendrix was quite a fan of this chord. For example, we can see it here in Purple Haze. And what makes it so distinctive is that we simultaneously have the major third here, the G sharp, and we also have the minor third here, the G natural, although the most accurate way to notate this would be with an F double sharp. Now, of course, this chord got its name by being used significantly by Jimi Hendrix, but we can also see it in other songs, like here in Michelle. A pickety third is when a passage of music in the minor key resolves onto the major chord. For example, this passage of music is in the key of B minor, but resolves with a B major chord, giving it a grand and complete ending.
We hope that you choke, that you choke.
An altered chord is an idea from jazz where the dominant chord of the key, the fifth chord of the key, has its fifth either flattened or sharpened, and or could have its ninth flattened or sharpened. I say and or because if a chord chart says G alt, for example, it's not specifying a particular type of altered chord, it's just telling the player that they need to play a G dominant 7 chord, but with some alteration made to the fifth and or the ninth. The alterations made to the dominant chord will add extra tension to the chord, meaning it will have a sweeter resolution when it reaches back to the tonic chord. Polyrhythm is when we have more than one consistent pulse playing at the same time. So, for example, a very common polyrhythm is 3 against 2, 2 consistent pulses in the same time as 3 consistent pulses. A tritone substitution is an idea from jazz music where we substitute a dominant chord with the dominant chord a tritone away from it. This is most commonly done with the fifth chord of the key, so for example in the key of C major, we would be substituting our G7 chord for a D flat 7 chord. And what allows this to work is that both those chords, G7 and D flat 7, both contain the same tritone, so they both have the same effective resolution back to the tonic chord. Quartal harmony is harmony built from stacks of fourths. So most of the harmony we deal with is what we would call tertiary harmony, harmony built from thirds. All our common chord types, major, minor, diminished, seventh, ninth, anything like that, is built by stacking thirds up. But alternatively, we could make chords by stacking different intervals like fourths. For example, in Tarkus by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, these arpeggiated chords played on the organ are all built by stacking fourths up. And as you can see from the chord labels, because our chord labeling system is built around tertiary harmony, when we're dealing with quartal harmony, the names can get a little bit odd. You'll see a lot of sus4, for example. And the last thing we've got in this tier is minor scale modes. So earlier we mentioned diatonic modes. These are modes of the major scale, where we've taken the major scale, but we've started on a different degree, resulting in a new scale, like Mixolydian, Dorian, etc. Minor scale modes are when we make modes from a minor scale. So for example, we might take the melodic minor scale, and by starting on a different scale degree, we generate a new alternative scale. For example, the fourth mode of the melodic minor scale is what we would call Lydian dominant. And this is the scale used in the Simpsons theme song. Every musician can benefit from being able to tell how to play a song just by ear. While ear training may sometimes seem like learning a new language, it doesn't have to be that difficult. Hook Theory have just released a really fun, really effective ear training game called Chord Crush. Chord Crush will play you a chord progression where only some of the chords are revealed to you, and you have to, using your ears, identify the missing chords. Even if you've never detected chords by ear before, Chord Crush starts you at the absolute basics and then will build up the difficulty as you progress. For a limited time, you can get 20% off a yearly premium subscription. Subscribe today at hooktheory.com/David Bennett. Right, we're really getting into the depths of this ocean now. Metric modulation. Metric modulation is when we switch from one time signature to another, but the two are connected by a consistent mathematic relationship. For example, we could switch from 6/8 to 4/4. We can make the two sort of connect together by making the eighth note worth the same amount in 6/8 as it is in 4/4. So the two different meters sort of get married by this consistent note value. A polymeter is when we have effectively two different time signatures playing at the same time. What this means is that one part will effectively go out of time with the other until a full rotation has happened when they fall back into sync together. For example, the song 5/4 by Gorillaz has a guitar riff in 5/4, but a drum pattern in 4/4. So after the first bar, the two go out of sync until they've rotated enough that they're back together again. An octatonic scale is technically any scale with 8 notes, but most commonly it's referring to one of two symmetrical scales. One that goes semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, and the other does the opposite, going tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone. This second octatonic scale here that goes tone, semitone is also referred to as a diminished scale, and is what we hear at the beginning of the song Just by Radiohead. The double harmonic scales are two scales that are often referred to with a variety of different names. The double harmonic major, sometimes just referred to as the double harmonic scale, is just like the major scale but with a flattened second degree and a flattened sixth degree. And the double harmonic minor scale, sometimes referred to as the Hungarian minor scale, is exactly the same as our usual harmonic minor scale, but with the fourth degree raised. The double harmonic minor is also actually the fourth mode of the double harmonic major. A mu chord is just a particular name for what you might think of as an add-2 chord, a major chord with the second degree added in as well. The name mu chord was popularized by the band Steely Dan, who were particularly fond of this chord type. Polytonality is when we have more than one key playing at the same time. A composer well known for his use of polytonality is Charles Ives. For example, in this piece, the two upper voices of the choir are in the key of C major, and the two lower voices are in the key of B flat major. God be merciful unto us. Bebop scales are variations on typical scales where an extra note has been added in. For example, the bebop dominant scale is just like the Mixolydian scale, but also features the unaltered seventh degree, so we've got the flat seventh and the natural seventh in the scale. Or you could have bebop Dorian, which is just like regular Dorian, but also includes the major third. These are the sort of scales that were used by bebop musicians like Charlie Parker, Miles Davis and John Coltrane. However, it's important to remember that the idea of the bebop scales wasn't theorized until years after the bebop era. It was more of a retrospective way of analyzing how these players performed. Put simply, the Tristan chord is a half-diminished chord, and it gets its name from being the opening chord of Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde. So this is a chord we could label F minor 7 flat 5, but that's kind of missing the point of the Tristan chord. The importance of the Tristan chord is the fact that it's opening an opera with tonal ambiguity. Typically, an opera would open with a very clear statement of key, a clear statement of where we are tonally. But when Wagner opened his opera with this chord, it changed that. And many have argued that the use of this Tristan chord was the beginnings of atonality in Western music. Which leads me on nicely to the last thing in this tier, which is atonality. Atonality is quite simply when a piece of music avoids having any sense of tonal center, any sense of key. A atonal piece of music effectively has no key. This piece by Arnold Schoenberg very much avoids having any sense of key or resolution. Right, we're approaching the bottom of this iceberg, the second to last tier, and we start off with swing ratios. Swing as a rhythm is effectively when two eighth notes have unequal rhythms to each other, where one eighth note is longer than the other eighth note, and a swing ratio is a way of describing how much that difference is. So for example, a 1-to-1 relationship would be not swing, it would be straight, because both eighth notes have equal duration. However, a 2-to-1 swing fill would be triplet fill, because the first note has double the duration of the second. 3-to-1 ratio would be a dotted eighth note swing like this. The first note has 3 times as much duration as the latter. A 3-to-2 ratio would be a type of quintuplet swing like this. Or we could have a 4-to-1 relationship like this, which is also a type of quintuplet swing. Of course, it's very important to remember that swing players aren't thinking in terms of swing ratios when they play, they're just letting it naturally swing, and the ratio to which they're swinging might even change throughout the performance. But swing ratios can be very useful when you're trying to program swing into a DAW. Overtones. So pretty much any time you play a note, for example on a piano, you're not just hearing that note. If I play an A on the piano, we are hearing what's called the fundamental pitch of A, but we're also hearing a series of overtones above that, quieter sympathetic notes, which effectively colour the tone of the note. And they always follow the exact same pattern of intervals in what's called the overtone series, or the harmonic series. The intervals start off by being very fundamental recognisable intervals, like octave, perfect fifth, perfect fourth, major third, minor third. Then as we get into the quieter and much harder to hear harmonics, they venture into intervals that we wouldn't find in our standard tuning system, like a sub-minor third, a super major second, and so on. And the amazing thing is, even though all of these are technically separate frequencies, separate pitches, our ear perceives them all as one cohesive note. 24 tet. So right at the beginning, we talked about 12-tone equal temperament, where our instruments are tuned by tuning the octave and then dividing the space between those octaves into 12 equally spaced pitches. Well, 24 tet is 24-tone equal temperament. Tet is just short for tone equal temperament. So 24 tet is a way of creating what you might call microtonal music, by giving us an extra microtonal note between every standard pitch on our piano. For example, here's a piece of music by Ivan Witzengradsky, which is written in 24-tone equal temperament. And off to the right of our 24 tet here, we have some microtonal accidentals, which we could use to notate our 24 tet music. We have a half sharp, so we could have, for example, an A half sharp, which is a note pitched between the notes A and B flat. We could have a half flat, so a half flat would be a note pitched between A and A flat. And we could even have something like this, which is a sharp and a half. A equals 415 hertz. So right at the beginning, we were looking at A equals 440 hertz, which is what we call concert pitch, the standard pitch that we tune A above middle C to. The standard of A440 was only brought in around 100 years ago, and before that, historically, a wide range of different tunings were used across different geographic areas. 415 is what we areas. 415 is what we call Baroque tuning, and is almost exactly one semitone lower than modern concert pitch. Baroque tuning is used when a performer wants to try and recreate the original sound of the composition closer to the original tuning it would have been written in. However, it's important to remember that 415 wasn't a historic standard, it was just one of many different tunings a Baroque instrument may have been tuned to. Just intervals. If an interval is just, it means it's been tuned to a perfect simple ratio. So for example, a justly tuned perfect fifth would be the ratio of 3 to 2. If you tune an instrument to just intervals, it's what we call just intonation or pure intonation. And although theoretically it's the purest way of tuning intervals, it presents a big problem. On any instrument with fixed tuning, like a keyboard instrument for example, you can't have pure intervals between every key without compromising other intervals. For example, if we tune our keyboard here in pure intonation in the key of A, so for example we have A and E as a 3 to 2 pure perfect fifth, unfortunately that means that by doing that, some of the other perfect fifths in the key are not 3 to 2 relationships and are actually very dissonant. So although 3 to 2 is the perfect and purest way to tune a perfect fifth interval, for keyboard instruments and similarly fixed tuned instruments, we have to have some way of adjusting or tempering this tuning system. As we discussed earlier, almost all modern music fixes this problem by using 12-tone equal temperament, where rather than worrying about the particular ratios between each interval, we just tune the octaves to perfect intervals and then divide the space between them logarithmically into 12 equally spaced pitches. And although of course this means that none of these intervals are now pure apart from the octave, they're close enough that our ear doesn't really mind. But 12-tone equal temperament isn't the only way of fixing this problem. Historically, other temperament systems were used. For example, mean tone temperament. Mean tone temperament, for example, is a system that was used historically to try and maintain justly tuned thirds, and it did this by slightly compromising the tuning of a fifth. Now exactly how this was managed is a topic for another video, but what is interesting is in old temperament systems like mean tone temperament, because each instance of each interval was actually tuned subtly differently, it meant that different key centers actually had different characters. Some key centers were more in tune than others. So unlike in our modern system of 12-tone equal temperament where every key sounds exactly the same, different keys could actually have different qualities.
In D minor, which I always find is really the saddest of all keys. Really, I don't know why, but it makes people weep instantly, player.
Nested tuplets. So a regular tuplet, an example of a regular tuplet would be a triplet. So a triplet is when we force 3 notes into the space where we would usually only have 2 notes. Another type of tuplet we could have would be a quintuplet, where you fit 5 notes into the space where you might have previously only had 2, or previously only had 4. Or you could have a septuplet, where you force 7 notes into a space. So that's regular tuplets, but a nested tuplet is a tuplet inside of a tuplet. And as you can imagine, this starts getting quite confusing quite quickly. Here we have a triplet nested inside of a quintuplet. And I've also placed these regular notes and this regular triplet here to give it a bit of context. Performing these can be very difficult, and conceptualizing how the different tuplets are interacting with the pulse can be quite mind-boggling. Now we can take that mind-bogglingness to another level by having a double nested tuplet. A tuplet inside of a tuplet inside of a tuplet. So for example, here we have a septuplet inside of a quintuplet inside of a triplet. But really, at this point, this rhythm is getting quite absurd and precise. There's almost always an easier and more intuitive way to transcribe a rhythm like this. For example, rather than the septuplet, quintuplet, triplet situation, we could have had virtually the same rhythm notated like this, with just a regular nested tuplet. And the last thing we've got on this tier is neutral intervals. Earlier we were talking about microtonality and half flats and half sharps and that sort of thing. Well, a neutral interval is a microtonal interval. For example, a neutral third is a third where the note is between a major or minor third. So for example, in the key of C major, a major third would be C and E natural, a minor third would be C and E flat, so a neutral third would be C and E half flat. So welcome to the deep, the bottom of our music theory ocean. And let's start off with a concept that really did blow my mind when I was first introduced to it, and that is that pitch is equal to rhythm. Pitch and rhythm are ultimately the same thing. So a note, a pitch, for example, middle C, is just the frequency, right? Middle C is 261.63 Hz, which means that the sound waves are completing their vibration, completing their cycle 261.63 times a second. Or you could times that by 60 and get 15,697.8 vibrations per minute, which effectively means that middle C is just a pulse, a regular pulse, playing at 15,697.8 BPM. Pitch is the same thing as tempo, and we can actually hear that if we slow down this note, slow down our middle C, we eventually just get to a pulse. Sounds like a kick drum, right? Well, we can do the same thing in reverse. This is a quarter note kick drum pulse at 160 BPM. Now see what happens if we gradually increase the tempo of this pulse. At some point, as we increase the tempo, our ears stop perceiving that pulse as a rhythm and begin perceiving it as a pitch, because rhythm and pitch are the same thing. Amazingly, this also applies to chords and intervals. Do you remember earlier when I mentioned that a justly tuned perfect fifth is the ratio of 3 to 2? One sound wave vibrates 3 times in the same amount of time as the other sound wave vibrates 2 times. So it's a 3 against 2 polyrhythm, right? If we take this rhythm, which is a 3 against 2 polyrhythm, and speed it up, and as I said, we can turn this into a chord as well. We've already got our fifth, so if we added in a major third, which is the ratio of 5 to 4, a 5 against 4 polyrhythm, what begins as this rhythm turns into a major chord. So we've already mentioned A equals 440 Hz, which is our standardized universal concert pitch, and we've also mentioned A equals 415 Hz, which is our Baroque era standardized pitch. However, A equals 432 Hz isn't some sort of standardized concert pitch. It's actually a pseudo-scientific idea in music that if you tune your music to 432 Hz, it resonates better with, I don't know, aliens or space or something, I don't know. If you're not getting the point, this is the sort of homeopathy of music. Adam Neely's already got a great video debunking 432, so do check that out if you're interested. Super, ultra, hyper, mega, meta Lydian scale. So this is effectively a Lydian scale, but when you reach the 5th degree, you then start a new Lydian scale from that degree. So for example, if we're in a key of C major, we'd start doing C, D, E, F sharp, G. That's the beginning of C Lydian. But now that we've reached the 5th of G, we now continue with a G Lydian scale, G, A, B, C sharp, D. And now once again, now we're on the 5th of that scale, we continue with a new Lydian scale based on the scale degree of D. And the idea is that this is a scale that continues to get brighter and brighter as it ascends. Deutsch's scale illusion is when we're played one melody in one ear and another melody in the other ear, and we actually wind up hearing a third composite melody. So this will work best if you have headphones on, but here's melody 1 that will be played in our left ear, and here's melody 2 that will be played in our right ear. And as you'll hear when they're played together, we hear a third melody. Now, this very much is a trick, an illusion, and it only really works because both melodies are played with the same timbre, the same instrument. If one of the melodies was played on a violin, for example, and the other on a piano, it wouldn't really work. What's happening is, although these notes are split across our 2 ears and written here in 2 different staves, if we condense them down onto one stave, we can see that really it's one harmonized melody going up and down. Each of our ears gets one fragment of the melody, but of course we perceive the entire experience as one piece of music, one melody. A shepherd tone is another auditory illusion where we seem to hear a pitch that's going up indefinitely, which of course would be physically impossible because eventually it would go beyond the limitations of our hearing. How this works is we're actually hearing various sine waves at the same time of the same note at different octaves. As the shepherd tone ascends, the sine waves at the top, the ones with the highest octave, start to become inaudible, but as that happens, they're replaced with new sine waves at the bottom. So as the highest sine waves become too high pitched for us to hear, our ear just switches to listening to the sine wave an octave below it. Irrational time signatures. 712 is an example of an irrational time signature. With all time signatures, the top number is telling us how many beats there will be in each bar, and the bottom number is telling us what type of beat that will be. So 3/4 is telling us that there will be 3 quarter notes in each bar of the music. So how do we apply that with 712? There's no such thing as a 12th note, so how can we have 7 of them in a bar? Well, let's go back to 3/4 for a minute. We think of it as 3 quarter notes, but what even is a quarter note? A quarter note is a quarter of a whole note. So what a time signature is effectively telling us is take a whole note, divide it into the fraction that we've given you in the time signature, so in this case quarters, and then give us 3 of those quarters per bar of the music. The same logic applies with our 712 irrational time signature. Take your whole note, divide it now into 12ths, 8th note triplets, and then each bar of our 712 music is going to have 7 of those 7 8th note triplets. Now, you would never have a piece of music that was solely in an irrational time signature because it would be an over-engineered way of transcribing that music. It would always be an easier, more straightforward way to write that music down. Where irrational time signatures come in useful is when we mix them in with other rational time signatures. So, for example, our music could be in 3/4 and then jump to a bar of 7/12. Microtonal modulation. So a modulation is effectively a key change where the music moves from one key to another. A very common practice in all types of music, really. But a microtonal modulation is where we move to a key that is a microtonal interval away from where we started. So, for example, a regular modulation might be moving from G to A, whereas a microtonal modulation could be moving from G to A half sharp. For example, in Jacob Collier's arrangement of In the Bleak Midwinter, he modulates from E major, regular E major, to the key of G half sharp major. So we've modulated up a neutral third. What can I do? In this clip, Jacob shows how before the modulation, the piano is in tune with the music, but after the modulation, because we're now in a microtonal key, the piano is out of tune. 4 magical chords. and then Pythagorean tuning. So we've talked a lot about different temperaments, different ways that we can tune our piano. Right at the top we had 12-tone equal temperament, which is the temperament that we use in all of our instruments today. We then later talked about mean tone temperament, which is a historic way of tuning instruments that allows us to preserve a justly tuned third. But before that, people would tune their instruments to what's called Pythagorean tuning. This is a tuning system that instead of preserving the third, preserves the fifth of the key, meaning that all of the fifths are as well tuned as they can be. Now, just like all other temperament systems, Pythagorean tuning does result in some intervals that are less pleasing to the ear. But to give you an idea of how these different temperament systems sound, I'm going to play you a major chord followed by a major scale, initially in 12-tone equal temperament, our standard modern tuning system, then in mean tone temperament, which is the one that preserves the sound of the third, and finally in Pythagorean tuning, the one that preserves the sound of the fifth. Zen harmonic music is music that divides the octave into something different than just 12 degrees. For example, you could divide the octave into more degrees, like 19 or 21. Or you could divide the octave by a smaller number than 12, for example, 7 or 9. Now, Zen harmonic music has a lot of overlap with microtonal music, but the main difference is that microtonal music sort of assumes that you're starting from 12-tone equal temperament as a starting point, and then adding in extra notes between those notes, whereas Zen harmonic music throws out the entire idea of dividing the octave into 12 notes, and then divides it by some other number, which could be as small or as large as you like. Negative harmony. Negative harmony is the idea that each chord in the key can have a negative version of itself, which has the same level of tension and release relative to the tonic chord of the key. For example, if we're in the key of C major and we had a perfect cadence G7 resolving to C major, the negative version of that would be F minor 6 resolving to C major. Both G7 to C and F minor 6 to C has the same level of tension, the same level of voice leading, and thus are effectively the same type of resolution, but coming from two different angles, two different approaches. If we look at how the four notes of G7 resolve onto the notes of our C major chord, we can see that they have to move the exact same amount to get to their resolution as the notes of our F minor 6 chord do to get to C major. There's the same level of voice leading. The only difference is the direction of travel. The B in the G7 chord has to resolve upwards, whereas the A flat in the F minor 6 chord has to resolve downwards. So that is my music theory iceberg. Now I think what's so great about the iceberg as a way of explaining a concept is showing how you have to start at the top before you can progress downwards. Concepts like negative harmony and irrational time signatures are certainly interesting and can perk up the ear of a musician, but if you haven't already been through the layers above it, you're probably going to have a hard time understanding the concept. So in a similar way to my music theory tier list that I did a few months ago, you could use this iceberg as a way of informing how you should learn music theory and what order you should learn concepts. This In typical Western music, the smallest interval that we deal with, the smallest gap between two notes, is a semitone, otherwise known as a half step. On a keyboard, for example, the smallest interval I can go up or down from any note is a semitone. But even though we can't play them easily on a keyboard, there are pitches between these two notes. For example, this C here has the frequency of 261.6 Hz. That's the frequency at which the sound waves are vibrating to create the pitch. But the next note up, the C sharp, jumps up to 277.2 Hz. So there's certainly space in between these two frequencies. So what would happen if I played a note pitched between C and C sharp? This pitch is 269.4 Hz, the note halfway between C and C sharp, and what we would call C half sharp. Even the untrained ear can hear that this note is distinctly different from either the C or the C sharp. So why isn't it available on my keyboard? Why don't people use half sharps when they write music? Well, some musicians and composers do, and the music they write using these sub-semitone intervals is known as microtonal music. Western classical composers have been experimenting with microtonality since at least the turn of the 20th century. Our standard Western tuning system is known as 12-tet, or 12-tone equal temperament, because it divides the octave into 12 equally spaced pitches. But composers like Wyskin-Gretzky and Ives used alternative systems that divided the octave up into even smaller divisions, most commonly 24 divisions, doubling our standard 12 pitches. They went about this most often by writing for two pianos, one tuned a quarter tone flatter than the other, meaning that between the two pianos they had access to 24 notes per octave. In Wyskin-Gretzky's Prelude No. 1, he takes advantage of the 24 quarter tones by running up and down them in this ultrachromatic scale. In this excerpt from Charles Ives' three-quarter tone pieces, the focus of the music is quickly swaying back and forth between the two pianos, moving like a pendulum between 12-tet tuning and 24-tet tuning. In the brief moments when we're only hearing one of the two pianos, we experience just standard 12-tet tuning. But as the second piano re-enters again and the two overlap, we are plunged once more into the microtonal murkiness. When we look at the sheet music, we won't actually see any quarter tone accidentals, that is, any half sharps or half flats, because each piano on their own isn't actually playing any microtonal intervals, but it's the interaction between these two pianos tuned a quarter tone apart which creates the microtonality. So microtonality has been used in some experimental classical music, but can we find it in any modern pop or rock music? Perhaps the most common place to find microtonality in Western music is with instruments that can slide or glissando between the standard 12 pitches. For example, at the start of Rhapsody in Blue by George Gershwin, the clarinet glides seamlessly from this low F up to this high B flat. If the clarinet was restricted to the 12-tone system like a piano is, the glide would sound like this. But because the clarinet can access the notes between the standard 12 pitches, it can achieve this smooth, seamless glide. In modern electronic pop music, a glide like this is often called a riser. For example, this riser from just before the chorus of Uptown Funk. Like the clarinet glissando in Rhapsody in Blue, risers like this are taking advantage of the notes between the notes, as otherwise they couldn't achieve this seamless, tension-building climb. On guitar, the string can be bent so that the note that is sounding is somewhere in between two standard pitches. Notes are often bent up a quarter tone rather than a full semitone, giving us a microtonal note. This is a very common technique in the blues, or at least music that's been influenced by the blues, like rock. For example, the bass riff from Are You Going to Be My Gal by Chet features a quarter tone bend. When the D is bent up here, it only rises up to D half sharp, rather than reaching all the way up to our usual D sharp. As the note is so brief and ornamental, it can be hard to hear the difference here, but there certainly is one. When I play the two different notes in isolation, for example, the difference is much clearer. This is D natural followed by normal D sharp. And this is what Jet do, D natural followed by D half sharp. In the context of the song, whether or not this note is a D sharp or a D half sharp, it is acting as a blue note. Microtones are perfect for use as blue notes are notes that are added from outside of the scale to add a sense of tension, and what could be more out of the scale than a microtone? But perhaps the best suited instrument in Western music for microtonality is the voice. The human voice is of course not constricted to any tuning system, so it can easily sing any and all intervals if properly trained. For example, it's common for singers to ornament their melodies by gliding between two different notes of the scale. In the song Misery Business by Paramore, at the end of the chorus, Hayley Williams slowly slides between these two notes, spending a reasonable amount of time in the space between the standard pitches. This slow, deliberate slide between the two notes makes use of those microtonal dissonant notes in between. The only issue, though, with referring to slides and glissandos as microtonal is that they are almost always just passing through a microtonal note en route to a standard pitch. They don't rest on the microtonal note long enough, really, for the listener to register it. Is there any pop or rock music that uses microtonal intervals with the same weight as normal intervals, rather than a small seasoning on top of our standard tonality? Is there any music that uses microtonal intervals instead of our usual tonality? Well, in 2017, Australian rock band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard released their album Flying Microtonal Banana, which is written using 24-tet tuning that divides the octave into 24 pitches instead of 12, much like the classical composers we were talking about earlier. The band achieved this 24-tet tuning by using purpose-built microtonal guitars that featured additional frets on the neck to access the microtonal notes. Stu Mackenzie from King Gizzard originally wrote this record to be played on his baglama, a Turkish instrument which has frets placed at intervals that are close to what Western musicians would consider quarter tones. Have a listen to their tune Rattlesnake that is written in F sharp minor, but with a half flattened second degree, giving us a G half sharp rather than G sharp, and also a half sharpened sixth degree, giving us a D half sharp rather than a D natural. The resulting tonality is like a blend of old and new to Western ears. Quarter tones by
the bottom keyboard, and that's actually.
Hey, Dada. When do I get to shave?
Oh, years and years, little buddy. How about now, Dada?
What's good? What's good with you today? You're taking forever to write your verse.
I think I'm in a writer's block, bro. I can't think of any lyrics.
Well, my next artist comes in 15 minutes, so you better think of something quick. Maybe try using ChatGPT for the lyrics.
Dude, that's genius. Let me try it right now.
Write me a song about heartbreak and make it relatable. I bet I'm punching you in.
Only on my head, I thought that we were dead. You ain't by my side, but you still push me off the edge. How would I forget everything you did? Got me running backwards, feeling bad, I can't pretend. Cause all my life I wished for you, but you broke me. Yeah, you broke me. All this time I lived your life. Got some hopeless. Got some hopeless. Cause all my
What are you doing, bro?
I think I'm being chased by monsters.
What are you talking about? Monsters aren't real.
Yes, they are, bro. They were literally following me. Bro, where did he just go? Where did he just go?
every time you say a prayer, cause you know that you're a monster. You know that you're a monster. I see you everywhere, in all my nightmares. I can't get away from your violence.
Yo, dude, I'm sorry I'm late. Yo, your session ended 20 minutes ago. I thought you weren't coming.
That's my bad, bro. I literally ran over my niece on the way here. But it's all good, though. I'll record it all in one take.
You what? Whatever, that's besides the point. You only have 1 minute before my next artist comes, though. So, I can really only give you one chance.
Say less. That's all I need.
Alright, here goes nothing.
Only on my head, I thought that we were dead. You ain't by my side, but you still push me off the edge. How would I forget everything you did? Got me running backwards, feeling bad, I can't pretend. Cause all my life I wished for you, but you broke me. Yeah, you broke me. All this time I lived your life. Got some hopeless. Got some hopeless.
Making a song using AI, part 2.
First step is to use ChatGPT for the lyrics.
Write me a song for the GTA 6 soundtrack. Next, we use SoundRaw for the beat.
It asked me to select the genre, so I clicked pop. Then it asked for the mood, so I clicked sad.
The next step is to record the lyrics that ChatGPT gave us. You left your heart in California with nothing left to say. Now that we have everything we need, let's submit it all to AI to get it mixed and mastered.
I added all my files and submit.
Let's listen to the final result.
You left your heart in California with nothing left to say. Gray skies fill the new horizon, well I lie here away. I told you I've had enough of what you wanted. I've heard you enough, so save your breath. I told you that I got what I wanted, so maybe it's time we put this to rest.
Rate this song 1 to 10, but be brutally honest in the comment section.
I stand with myself, I keep on wasting time. No fix was right or wrong, and it's all alright. So I was feeling on the ground, you ended up with your face, and I would do it again, no matter what you say. When the ghetto's so hard, it's on the bad guy now.
Rate my new song 1 to 10, but be brutally honest in the comment section.
I guess we collided in our dreams. I really wanna go, but you ran me out.
Hey, welcome to Top Golf. Come swing.
Hello, is this Top Golf?
Yes, this is Top Golf. Come swing with us. How are you?
You have one incoming robbery for 12 Titleist TSI2 drive.
F-sharp. Today we're going to check out a couple of different easy ways of making lo-fi hip-hop using microtonal harmony. Now our Western system of music is based on 12-tone equal temperament, which means that we have 12 equally spaced notes in the octave. All chord progressions, all melodies, everything really is based on these 12 notes. There are many other systems that we could use, and many other cultures have used them for thousands of years, but Western music is dominant, and we are so encultured to that sound that anything outside of 12-tone equal temperament has the general tendency to sound out of tune.
We have an out-of-tune player here.
Now, fortunately for us, lo-fi hip-hop music is built on the aesthetic of degraded cassette tapes and tape machines, which also have the tendency to make the music sound kind of out of tune. It's part of the sound of the style. My thought is that we could take the out-of-tune feeling that we have from listening to microtonal music and just slot it into the aesthetic of lo-fi hip-hop. So let's try it. And the first microtonal system that we're going to use exploits the age-old question: what is the note that's in between C and C sharp? Well, the answer, of course, is C half sharp. Now, how do we get C half sharp? Well, the way that we get it is by adding another keyboard to our setup. We're going to tune this keyboard a quarter tone sharp from the bottom keyboard, and that's actually really easy to do in a digital audio workstation. We're just going to load up a new patch and then retune it up 50 cents, which is the equivalent of a quarter tone. Now we can play in the cracks between notes. We've doubled the total number of notes that we can play, and we can play a full 24-note chromatic scale. So I've loaded up a wonky beat. Let's make some music with this. So that's not super in the aesthetic that we're going for. What should we do? Now, personally, I've had the most luck creating music with this quarter tone system by switching chords between the two keyboards. That way, each individual chord will still sound super nice to us, but then there's this like weird microtonal distance between the chords. Check it out. I love the sound of that. It sounds so spooky and different than anything that you can normally get in 12-tone equal temperament. There's a smoothness that occurs between the chords that I really love. It's almost as smooth as the shave that you'll get from today's sponsor, Harry's.com. Now, fans of my channel know that I used to not shave as much before getting in front of the camera. That has since changed because I think the smooth look is much better suited for me. That came with its own annoyance, though, because refills for razors are incredibly expensive. Sometimes they cost between $30 and $40 for an 8-pack. Now, enter the subscription service, Harry's.com. 6 years ago, Harry's founders Jeff and Andy bought a factory in Germany so they could sell razors directly to millions of men at a fair price. Harry's was kind enough to send me a starter kit. The starter kit included a weighted handle with a textured rubber grip, a 5-blade razor cartridge, as well as a very nice foaming shave gel. I'm a fan of the fact that Harry's donates 1% of all of its proceeds towards men's mental health organizations. So if you'd like, Harry's right now is doing a deal on its trial set. You can redeem your trial set for just $3 by clicking the link in the description, and you too can be as smooth as these quarter tone chord progressions. Anyway, the way that I play bass guitar to that groove is by retuning my E and D strings up a quarter tone. You can do that with a tuner by setting the reference to 453 Hz and then tuning normally. There we go.
We have an out-of-tune player here.
At least the situation where you can play some cool like Arabic sounding lines by using that second scale degree that's been lowered by a quarter tone like this. I think that sort of thing is pretty neat, but at the same time, that's not the aesthetic.
Well, it needs to rise. It needs to rise, but it can't rise a major third because that would put me in A flat, and that's like this. You know, and if I got a minor third, it would put me in G, which is it's fine, but it's too neutral. So I thought I'd just put it in the middle. So I thought G half sharp. I'll give it a try. I've always wanted to try to modulate to G half sharp without you realizing, and I got away with it. So, the 4 magical chords, and then that's but like.
And also some of that uniqueness. It's an arrangement of the Christmas Carol in the Bleak Midwinter, where at one point he manages to modulate from E major to G half sharp major, halfway between G and G sharp. What can I give? I mean, how many pieces can you think of that change temperament during the piece? Now, I'm not just here to make a gushing video about how wonderful Jacob Collier is, and you can certainly question whether there's any expressive point in all of this other than to show off, and we'll come to that question at the end. But after my recent video about different types of tuning systems, I've been thinking about doing something more about equal temperament and the way it differs from the natural overtones.
Giant pepper. Blue and red Takis. Giant lobster.
Hear me out. What if there was a song that had Oliver Tree, Post Malone, and Tory Lanez all on an 80s style Alone at Prom beat like this?
Do you not realize that it hurts me?
What if it was all three of those artists together? How can we make that happen? AI. Oliver Tree, Post Malone, Tory Lanez, and I want it to sound like an 80s Alone at Prom style song. Alright, I just finished generating. The song is called Love Is a Lie.
I spend all my nights thinking about my regrets. Some days I'm wishing that we would have never met. No love is not a story, baby, I'm not there. So
There's no way to do that. Bro, AI is terrifying. Just kidding, it's my song and it comes. Yo, it's Rudy Wade, and I'm gonna give you my phone number if you keep watching this video. If you don't know who I am, I made the popular song Trapped in
What can I do?
Can you guess the song? Dink, 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 a diddle link, dink, dink, a dink, dink, dink. Dink, 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 a diddle link, dink, dink, a dink, dink, dink.
Ryan Tedder is the best songwriter of this generation. True or false? I say true.
Tell me what you want to hear, something that'll light those ears. I'm sick of all the insincere, I'm gonna give all my secrets.
Tell me what you want to hear, something that'll light those ears. I'm sick of all the insincere, I'm gonna give all my secrets. Tell me what you want to hear, something that'll light those ears. I'm sick of all the insincere, I'm gonna give all my secrets. Tell me what you want to hear, something that'll light those ears. I'm sick of all the insincere, I'm gonna give all my secrets. Tell me what you want this time, don't need another perfect life. Don't care if critics all the jumps inside. I'm gonna give all my secrets away.
So good, Ryan.
Part 2. In part 1 of the series, we looked at how algorithms using a pretty complicated topic, a lot easier to learn using board games. That is base rules, as well as different expansions to add new dimensions and possibilities in the game. These concepts can be much more applicable to small jumps. So far, we covered some
What's good with you today? You're taking forever to write your verse.
I think I'm in a writer's block, bro. I can't.
What's good with you?
AI. As most of you know, I am the owner of the last ever Grimace Shake. And recently, a popular content creator named CG5 went viral for making a song about that same Grimace Shake. When he found out that I had the last ever Grimace Shake,
As most of you know, I'm the owner of the last ever Grimace Shake. And recently, a popular content creator named CG5 went viral for making a song about that same Grimace Shake. When they found out that I had the last ever Grimace Shake, every other fly all the way to Arizona to California than to Disney. I was talking to Wesley the Grimace Shake right on our
The mother. The mother. The father. Hello. What is your name? My name is. Morning. 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 Good morning. Good afternoon. Good night. Goodbye. Morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good night. Goodbye.